The off-season felt like a century, but I spent every moment honing my craft, sculpting my physique, and envisioning the glory that awaited me. The first year was a whirlwind. Rookie mistakes, flashes of brilliance, and a taste of what it meant to be a professional footballer. But the second year, that was my time to shine, and I knew it. When preseason kicked off, I was in peak condition, ready to dominate. The coaches noticed, my teammates noticed, and most importantly, I noticed. Confidence surged through me like an electric current. I was ready to show the world that last year was no fluke. I wasn't just another player, I was a force of nature. As the new season approached, the buzz around me was electrifying. Pundits, fans, and even my teammates couldn't stop talking about my potential. I had spent the off-season working harder than ever, perfecting my skills, and focusing on my fitness. I was ready to take on the world. The preseason matches were a cakewalk. I dominated every game, scoring goals and setting up assists like it was second nature. The media dubbed me the next big thing, and I relished every moment of it. I knew I was destined for greatness, and I couldn't wait to prove it once the real season began. The next few games were a blur of brilliance. I was untouchable, gliding past defenders with ease and finding the back of the net almost at will. My confidence soared with each match, and so did my stats. By the end of the first month, I had already scored 8 goals and assisted in 4 more. The league was at my feet, and I was loving every second of it. My teammates looked up to me, knowing that as long as I was on the pitch, we had a winning chance. The opponents dreaded facing me, their strategies often falling apart as they tried to contain my brilliance. I was not just a player, I was a phenomenon. With success, however, came the inevitable critics and haters. Some called me arrogant, others claimed I was a one-season wonder, but I knew better. Their words were nothing but fuel to my fire. I thrived on their doubt, using it as motivation to push myself even harder. What set me apart, though, was my mindset. I was not just playing for fun or for the fame, I was playing to be the best. Every training session was an opportunity to improve, every match a stage to showcase my skills. I studied my opponents, learning their weaknesses and exploiting them mercilessly. I was not just physically superior, I was mentally ahead of the game. While I was the star, football is a team sport, and I never forgot that. My success was also a result of the incredible support from my teammates and the coaching staff. We had a fantastic camaraderie, and I made sure to lift everyone around me. A great leader not only shines, but also helps others shine. Game after game, I dominated. Defenders couldn't keep up with my speed, my agility, my vision. Goalkeepers were left helpless against my powerful shots. I was a one-man army, a juggernaut on the pitch. By the end of the first month, I had already scored multiple goals and had a handful of assists. The media was in a frenzy. Fans were chanting my name. Opponents were trembling at the thought of facing me. Football is a team sport, but let's be honest, I was the backbone of our success. My presence on the pitch lifted the team. My confidence was infectious. My teammates looked to me for inspiration, and I delivered every time. I wasn't just a player, I was a leader, a motivator, a beacon of excellence. Our coach often said that having me on the team was like having an extra player. I could turn the tide of any game with a single touch, a single pass, a single shot. And I relished that responsibility. I thrived under pressure. The bigger the stage, the better I performed. I was never one to shy away from the spotlight, but I started to see the cracks. The late nights, the endless celebrations, they were taking their toll. I'd lost count of the mornings I'd woken up with a pounding headache, dragging myself to training with barely enough energy to get through the session. It wasn't sustainable, and deep down, I knew it. So I made a decision. This year was going to be different. I wasn't going to be the guy who burned out after a season or two. I had too much talent to waste. This year I was going to prove that I could be disciplined, that I could push myself beyond what anyone thought was possible. And I was going to start by cutting back on the parties. Cutting back on the nightlife wasn't easy. The invitations kept coming and the temptation was always there. but I was focused. I swapped out the late nights for early mornings, the clubs for the gym. My new routine was brutal, but I loved it. I felt stronger, faster, more in control. The decision to change wasn't entirely my own. My dad had a lot to do with it. Growing up, he was my biggest supporter, but also my toughest critic. He saw the potential in me before anyone else did, and he never let me forget it. But after my first season, he saw something else: complacency. My club had always been the priority, and that didn't change. But as the season kicked off, I knew that to really make my mark, I had to take my game to the next level. I had to dominate every match, every opponent, whether it was in the league, in Europe, or on the international stage. The first few matches of the season were almost too easy. I was faster, stronger, and more focused than ever before. My touch was perfect, my vision was unparalleled, and I was scoring goals for fun. The press couldn't get enough of me. They called me a prodigy, a once-in-a-generation talent. But I wasn't just satisfied with being the best in the league. I wanted to be the best in the world. When the international break came, I was ready. I'd been called up to represent my country before, but this time it was different. I wasn't just another player in the squad. I was the player everyone was talking about. The expectations were sky high, and I was determined to exceed them. Representing your country is a different kind of pressure. The stakes are higher, the fans are more passionate, and the entire world is watching. But I thrived in that environment. I loved the attention, the expectations, the pressure. It brought out the best in me. My first game for the national team that season was a statement. From the first whistle, I was all over the pitch, dictating play, creating chances, and making defenders look foolish. I scored 2 goals, both of them spectacular, and set up another. We won comfortably, and the media couldn't stop talking about my performance. Balancing club and international duties isn't easy, but I made it look that way. Every time I returned from international duty, I picked up right where I left off with my club. My performances were so consistent, so dominant, that it didn't matter whether I was playing in front of 10,000 fans or 100,000. I always delivered. My club coach knew he had something special in me, and he built the team around my talents. We were winning every match, dominating the league, and making deep runs in European competitions. But as good as it felt to be the main man at the club, there was something special about putting on that national team jersey. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about representing my country, carrying the hopes and dreams of millions of people. But I thrived under that weight. It didn't slow me down. It made me even more determined. Every time I stepped on the pitch, whether for my club or country, I was driven by the desire to be the best. Not just in my city, not just in my country, but in the world. One game doesn't make a season, but it sure as hell sets the tone. After that first match, I felt invincible. Every time I stepped onto the pitch, I knew I was the best player out there. My confidence was through the roof, and I was playing with a swagger that made it clear I was on a different level. The second game came quickly, and it was more of the same. We were up against a team that had given us trouble in the past, but this time was different. From the opening minutes, I was in control. They couldn't handle my pace, my skill, my vision. I was running the show, dictating the tempo, and making sure we played the game on my terms. I scored again, a beautiful solo effort where I danced through 3 defenders before slotting it past the keeper. And as if that wasn't enough, I set up 2 more goals, ensuring we walked away with a comfortable 3-0 win. By the third game, it was clear to everyone that I was on a mission. Another goal, another assist, another dominant performance. The fans were chanting my name, the media was singing my praises, and the opposition was terrified. I was in the form of my life, and nothing was going to stop me. The momentum was building, and I could feel the energy growing with each passing week. We were winning, and I was leading the charge. But as good as it felt, I knew there was more to come. I wasn't just after individual accolades. I wanted that trophy. And to get it, I needed to keep pushing, keep improving, and keep dominating. As the season progressed, the pressure started to build. We were sitting at the top of the table, but everyone was gunning for us. The media was hyping us up. The fans were expecting greatness, and the other teams were desperate to knock us off our perch. But I thrived under pressure. It was like fuel to me, driving me to be even better, even more ruthless. There were some tough games along the way, matches where we had to dig deep and grind out results. But in every one of those games, I made sure I was the difference maker. Whether it was scoring a crucial goal, making a last-ditch tackle, or providing the perfect pass, I was always there when my team needed me most. The more we won, the more the expectations grew. The talk of trophies started to get louder, and I could feel the weight of it on my shoulders. But I didn't shy away from it. I embraced it. I wanted that pressure, that responsibility. I wanted to be the one who led my team to glory. By the halfway point of the season, I was on fire. I had scored more goals than anyone else in the league, and I was top of the assist chart too. My performances were being hailed as some of the best in the league, and there was talk of me being the best player in the country. But I wasn't interested in personal accolades. I had one goal in mind, and I wasn't going to stop until I achieved it. As dominant as I was on the pitch, there was always a battle raging within me. The pressure, the expectations, the constant scrutiny, it all started to take its toll. I was pushing myself to the limit every week, and while my performances were still top-notch, I could feel the strain. There were times when I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. Every game, every training session, every interview, it all felt like a test that I couldn't afford to fail. The fear of letting my team down, of not living up to the hype, was always in the back of my mind. But I didn't let it show. I couldn't. I was the leader, the one everyone looked to for inspiration. I couldn't afford to show any weakness, any doubt. So I kept pushing, kept grinding, kept giving everything I had. Off the pitch, I started to become more isolated. The pressure to perform was so intense that I found it hard to switch off. I stopped going out as much, stopped seeing my friends and family as often. I was so focused on football, on winning, that everything else started to fade into the background, but I didn't mind. This was the life I had chosen, and I was determined to see it through. I had come too far, sacrificed too much, to let anything get in the way of my goal. The halfway point of the season was approaching, and we were still at the top of the table. But the competition was fierce, and every game was a battle. We were grinding out results, but there was a sense that something needed to change if we were going to go all the way. It was during this period that I had a conversation with one of the senior players in the squad, a guy who had been there and done it all. He had won trophies, played in big games, and knew what it took to succeed at the highest level. He pulled me aside after a tough training session and said, "You're doing great, but you need to remember that it's a long season. You can't do it all on your own. Trust your teammates, trust the process, and don't put too much pressure on yourself. You've got the talent, but you also need to have the right mindset." His words hit me hard. I realized that I had been putting so much pressure on myself to be the hero, to be the one who led us to glory, that I had lost sight of the bigger picture. Football is a team game, and as much as I wanted to be the best, I needed to trust the guys around me. That conversation was a turning point for me. I started to play with more freedom, more joy. I stopped overthinking, stopped trying to do everything myself, and it showed in my performances. I was still dominating, still making a difference, but I was also bringing the best out of my teammates. We were playing as a unit, and we were unstoppable. As we moved into the second half of the season, everything started to click. We were winning game after game, playing with a confidence and swagger that no one could match. The momentum was building, and the talk of trophies was getting louder. But I didn't let it distract me. I knew that the hard work wasn't over yet. Every game was a battle, and we couldn't afford to take our foot off the gas. I kept pushing myself, kept driving the team forward, kept my eyes on the prize. There were some tough moments along the way, injuries, suspensions, and the occasional dip in form. But we always found a way to bounce back, to keep the momentum going. And every time we faced a setback, it only made us stronger. The media was all over us, hyping up our chances, dissecting our every move. But I didn't let it get to me. I knew that the only thing that mattered was what happened on the pitch. And on the pitch, I was in control. My performances continued to be top-notch. I was scoring goals, creating chances, and dominating games. But more than that, I was leading by example. I was the one who set the tone, who made sure everyone was focused and ready to give their best. And as the season wore on, I could feel that first trophy getting closer and closer. We were in a strong position, and the belief was growing with every win. But I knew that we couldn't afford to get complacent. There was still a long way to go, and anything could happen. After the goal, the game took on a different tone. They threw everything at us, desperate to find an equalizer. But we held firm. The defense was solid, the midfield was composed, and up front, we were still causing problems on the counter. But as the clock ticked down, the tension started to rise. They were pushing harder and harder, and it felt like every attack could be the one that undid all our hard work. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I dropped deeper, helping out in defense, tracking back to make sure we didn't concede. I wasn't just a goal scorer, I was a leader, and I was determined to see this through. The final few minutes felt like hours. Every clearance, every tackle, every interception was cheered like a goal. And when the referee finally blew the whistle, the relief was overwhelming. We had done it. We had beaten our rivals, 1-0, and I had been the one to make the difference. In football, there are moments that define your career. Moments that take you from being just another talented player to someone who commands respect on the global stage. For me, that moment came when I was called up to the national team for the first time. I was 19, barely old enough to buy a pint, but here I was, stepping into the spotlight with the whole world watching. Not just as a player, though, as a captain. Imagine that, 19 years old, and I was handed the armband, tasked with leading the likes of Jude Bellingham and Cole Palmer. It was surreal, but it was also exactly what I had been preparing for my entire life. The build-up to my first international game as captain was intense. The media hype was off the charts, the expectations sky high. Everyone was waiting to see how I would handle the pressure, how I would lead the team in a real match situation. The night before the game, I barely slept. My mind was racing, going over every possible scenario, every potential challenge we might face. But as soon as I stepped onto the pitch, all those doubts and worries melted away. This was my domain, my battlefield. The roar of the crowd, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, it was like nothing else. I was ready. The game itself was a blur of action, intensity, and emotion. We were up against a strong opponent, and from the first whistle, it was clear that it was going to be a tough battle. But I was in the zone, fully focused, fully committed. Every touch, every pass, every tackle. I was in control, dictating the play, driving the team forward. Bellingham was immense in midfield, covering every blade of grass, breaking up play and starting attacks. Palmer was a constant threat up front, making intelligent runs, linking up with the midfield and causing havoc for their defense. But as good as they were, it was clear that the team was looking to me for leadership, for inspiration. The rest of the game was a battle, but we held our nerve. As the final whistle blew, we had secured a hard-fought win. My first game as captain, my first win, and a performance that showed everyone why I had been given the armband. But more than that, it was a sign of things to come. This was just the beginning.